This program is brought to you by
Namaste. Good morning. This is Ryan Shrestha from the Ryan Shrestha Show. It's a show about things that matter. And today I have an incredibly special guest, Chris Bowen, who is the Honorable Member of Parliament of Australia. And he has a very strong background in politics in Australia. He actually entered in Parliament in 2004. So it's been more than 17 years. And in that period, he has held a wide range of portfolios. I have to read out of my script actually, because there's so many portfolios he's had, and he's done significant policy reforms during his tenure. So he was Treasurer, Minister for Human Services, Minister for Immigration, Minister for Financial Services, Assistant Treasurer, Minister for Competition Policy, Minister for Small Business, and Minister for Tertiary Education. And currently, he is actually the Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy. So welcome to my show, Chris. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Great pleasure, Ryan. I'm very pleased to join you, and thanks for what you're doing and communicating to the community about matters of mutual interest to Australia and Nepal.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. So, Chris, let me start the conversation with the most pressing issue at the moment, COVID-19, which is actually having havoc in the society. Our lives been turned upside down, people losing jobs, mental stress, a lot of worries about, vaccination and things like that. So what do you think about the job the current government is doing so far in terms of vaccination campaign? Do you think it's been handled okay?
Look, the government made a lot of mistakes on the vaccine. We didn't buy enough vaccines. We didn't buy enough different types of vaccine. They really gambled that AstraZeneca would be the best vaccine for Australia. And I last year was saying that, we should have more types of vaccines in Australia so people have more choice. And if something goes wrong with one of them, there's other options. There's Pfizer, there's Moderna, there's Johnson & Johnson, there's other options. Now, the government didn't listen to that, and as a result, we got much AstraZeneca, but not enough Pfizer and not enough Moderna early enough. So that has been a big challenge for the vaccination rollout. Having said that, Australians have responded very well to the vaccine rollout. Our numbers are getting up now. Too late, but that's not the community's fault. The community is responding very, very well. And there's also been some mixed messages about vaccines, particularly about AstraZeneca. And changing advice, and that has caused a lot of concern. And I do understand that, but really, I do encourage everyone to get advice from their doctor, and if they're comfortable in proceeding, getting vaccinated, because it is a very important part of us returning to a more normal life.
Yeah, sure. So, I think I was watching the news this morning. Probably the vaccination rate has gone up to about 80% one dose in New South Wales, which is really great. So do you think now it's time for us to live with COVID? Are we ready for that?
Well, I think, Ryan, the key is making sure, of course, we have to get back to a more normal life, but the key is making sure we're prepared for the changes. We have to make sure the hospital system is ready to cope. Even at 80% vaccination rate, there's going to be more hospitalizations.
Yeah.
And we already have a hospital system, particularly here in Western Sydney, under pressure, don't we? Westmead's often under pressure, Blacktown's often under pressure. So I think the key is living with COVID fine, but let's make sure we're not dying with COVID. Let's make sure the system is ready. Let's make sure that the system can cope. Let's make sure every single preparation is in hand, because you can't just say, bang, 80%, everything's fixed, it's all magic, away we go. You can say at 80%, right, now we can do more things, and now we can, step back to a more normal life, but there's still going to be some health problems. So please, let's make sure the hospital system is ready to cope with that, do whatever is necessary. Otherwise, we can't open up safely. So that's the real test, I think, for governments. But of course, we all want to get back to a more open life as quickly as possible. And 80% is a very important milestone.
Right. And if we look at countries like, Israel, UK, even after such a high vaccination rate, they're having issues. Some of them are actually going back to lockdown. So do you think the current government should really now focus on treatment, because the vaccine part is almost done, so that we have proper treatment processes in place so that we don't have to go back to lockdown, right?
Well, we have to do both, Ryan. I mean, I think that we still have a job to do with vaccinations. 80% is good, but it'd be good to get to 90% or 95%. Right. There's always going to be some people who refuse, but the higher we get it, the better. And yes, treatments, but look, the doctors have treatment well in hand. I mean, the government and the doctors do a good job on treatment, but if there's not enough hospital beds, you can't treat. If there's not enough ICU beds, you can't treat. Sure. So that's my point about making sure the hospital system is ready.
Right. And Chris, the current government is spending like billions of dollars to, keep the economy afloat, right? But we have to also agree that this is the money that we don't have. We're borrowing the money, right? And it's kind of money from our, children, right? So do you think, the Labour Party will be making the current government accountable for the expenses, they've made so far? Because there's going to be a huge budget deficit, and you are going to inherit this deficit when you come into power next time, if you do.
Yeah, well, we do, and we will keep the government to account. Look, lots of spending was necessary, to be clear, and we support lots of this.
Definitely.
We needed to support people who were losing their jobs. We needed to support small business. So that's good. But also what we need to do is hold the government to account where it's misspent. I'll give you one example. JobKeeper. JobKeeper was a very good idea. We called for JobKeeper. We suggested it. It was absolutely necessary. But it was implemented very poorly in that many businesses got the money who didn't need it. Harvey Norman, their business went up and up and up because everybody was at home, Ryan, and we're all at home and we're saying, maybe we need a new table for the corner because we're sitting at home and looking at our house and thinking maybe we need a nice new chair. So we're online to Harvey Norman and ordering furniture. Their business went up, up, up. Why do they need JobKeeper? But they got millions and millions of dollars worth of JobKeeper because the government poorly designed the policy. And so we will hold and do hold the government to account for those design issues. Everybody agrees the government should spend money. Everybody agrees a deficit in this environment is essential. But let's not waste money. Yes. And this government has wasted too much money.
Yes, I think they've wasted probably close to $2 to $3 billion on JobKeeper by giving it to those businesses, as you said, who didn't need it, right? But I think, Labour government hasn't made such a big noise about this. Remember last time when there was global financial crisis, when the Labour government was spending so much money, Labour were making a big noise about it. Like, they were saying Labour government was sending out checks worth $800 to even dead people or people who are overseas. People are saying that, the current government is implementing so many social policies, which is very similar to what Labour would have done if it was in power. They're even telling that, they are like Labour light. What do you say about this?
Well, you're right. They said all sorts of things about the global financial crisis, the school halls. Remember, we got in our area, you go to our local schools, you see such beautiful schools now because of things the Labor Party did during the global financial crisis and built new halls and libraries and classrooms to keep the construction industry in work, but to improve our schools. And the Liberal Party didn't like it and whinged and complained about everything. We've taken a different approach, though. We are more positive. We don't like to criticise just for the sake of criticising. We recognise that in a pandemic, things are hard. So there's a balance to be struck as the opposition. We need to be positive, but also hold them to account. And I think we've got a pretty good balance there. Where we can support them, we do. But where they're getting something wrong, we criticise it, not just criticise it straight away. So they criticised everything during the global financial crisis, always. But we take a more positive approach, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Right, sure. I think at that time, the opposition leader was a little bit like, a barking dog. But I think at the moment, the Labour Party is more, balanced, as you said, which is really good. I mean, as you said, we can't just be complaining all the time. If they're doing a good job, you should say they're doing a good job, right? That's going to, put you in a positive image as well. Right. So let's move on to another thing that I want to talk to you about as a migrant myself. I came to Australia about 27 years ago, but I still have my parents back home in Nepal. Right. So with the borders closed, and also the Department of Immigration, not considering our parents as, the immediate family members, we're not actually able to bring them to Australia. What do you think about this? Like, do you think, the grandparents should be considered immediate family members? Because, we are in a kind of position where we can't go back home to look after them. And then they're there by themselves. They've been planning to come and meet us for the last 2 years almost. If you were an immigration minister, like you were an immigration minister in the past, would you look into this issue? Like, would you let us bring our parents here for a visit, on a visa?
I'd certainly look into it, Ryan. I know it's a very difficult situation. Let me just say a few things. Firstly, when I was the immigration minister, I did change the system to allow parents to visit with 5-year visas, which was, suggested to me by the subcontinental community to say, look, our parents, while they're waiting, maybe they're waiting for a permanent visa, or maybe they don't want a permanent visa, but they have to apply for a new visa every visit, and they want to come once or twice a year. And so I introduced 5-year visa visas, come and go as many times as you like. Very popular in the community, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm very grateful to the subcontinental community for suggesting it to me.
Yeah.
But also,
sorry, Chris, please.
That's okay. But also, I do recognise the pressures in the system more broadly. We have a waiting list for parents at the moment of close to 20 years. To be honest with you, and please, with great respect, many parents will die in those 20 years. They won't come to Australia, so it's useless. It's a bit of an insult. And we have the contributory parent visa, which you can come much faster, but it's very expensive. I know many people don't have that money. So I'm not the shadow minister for immigration. I'm not writing the policy, but I do very much feel for people who have their parents in that situation. And I do think it is something we can look at maybe in government to say, well, how are we going to improve this situation a little bit to give people a little bit more hope and a little bit more fairness. It's always going to be the case that not everybody who wants to come to Australia, including parents, can come. Yeah. But I think it is something we can look at to say, parents and grandparents are a very important part of the family unit. And at the moment, the family reunion immigration system isn't really giving parents a very good go.
Exactly. I think it'll be really good if you can look into this matter when you come into power next time. And as you said, like there is a contributory migrant visa for parents, but it's so expensive. It's about like $45,000 per parent, So you need $90,000 to bring them to Australia, right? Which is a lot of money, and a lot of us can't afford it. But if you look at it from the other perspective, like, these grandparents, when they come here, they actually can look after their grandkids. So they will be contributing to the economy, and the grandkids are the future taxpayers of Australia, right? The government can save so much money in childcare subsidies if there are grandparents here who can look after their grandkids. So it's a win-win, I think, we should really encourage these grandparents to migrate to Australia if possible.
Yeah, look, I understand what you're saying, and I'm very sympathetic. And I do think it's something governments need to look at, yes.
Right. So, Chris, I also wanted to talk to you a bit about the international students, right? I think, Australia must be one of the countries which which export education in a very large scale. Like it's the third biggest contributor to Australian economy. It's worth like $30 billion or something. But at the same time, sometimes I feel, because I was an international student as well, I feel that, we've been taken advantage of a little bit, because international students has to pay at least 50% more in tuition fees than local students. So we feel that sometimes we've been used more like a cash cow, right? Education should be such a noble thing, it shouldn't be so commercialized. And if you charge a reasonable fee, you can have more diverse students from all over the world, There could be students coming here from Africa, from Middle East, from South America, and you'll have a more diverse student population, which is good for everyone, even for Australian students. But at the moment, you see only people who can afford very high fees are coming to Australia. And some universities have just students from one nationality, which is not good for anyone. What do you think about this?
Yeah, again, Ryan, I think there's some issues that we need to look at as a country here. I'm not announcing specific policies, but I understand what you're saying. And I do think, Australia has had, in some senses, a very successful international education system. We've been sort of second or third in the world for international students after US or UK.
Yeah.
And that's good for Australia and good for the students, because we want to give them a good Australian experience. And even if they go home afterwards, as many will, most will, we want them to love their time in Australia, so they always love Australia. And they become ambassadors for Australia for the rest of their lives. But some of these people will become prime ministers and presidents, so we want them to love Australia. But also, you're right, to be frank, some of the universities have come to rely on international students for their funding and just pump out more and more and more and more and more. And that's not good for the university, it's not good for Australia, and it's not good for the students. So, and the pandemic and the lockdown has put a lot of pressure on universities because they've been too reliant on international students. So I think that it is something, again, that just as we come out of the pandemic, I think it's a good opportunity to think about a few things for the country and say, what have we got right? What have we got wrong here? How can we have the right balance of international students and not exploit international students, but give them a very good experience? Yes, international students will always have to pay more than domestic students because, they haven't paid the tax that domestic students have paid and his parents have paid, etc. But I think that, I think the system maybe has gone a little bit too far one way. So it's time for a bit of a rethink of that, yes.
Yeah, I think they don't mind paying a little bit more, but 50% more is, I think, a little bit too much, right?
I understand.
Yeah. And also, we can't be depending on international students to run our universities. We should really be self-sustainable, and we should be investing in our children as well, So I think Labour government in the past has been really good when it comes to policies in terms of investing in education, right? I think at one time, maybe 3-4 decades back, you even made university free for everyone, right?
Yeah. So that was a Whitlam government reform, and then the Hawke government introduced what was called HEX, is now called HELP. So you pay back some of your university after, so you don't have to find the money while you're at university when you're poor, but when you're earning money and hopefully getting a bit richer, you pay some back. Yes.
Sure. So if we invest in our children, in their education, then we don't actually really need to, kind of poach really highly skilled migrants from poorer countries as well. I'm not saying this, it's not really a good strategy. But I see so many engineers, doctors migrating to Australia from countries like Nepal. Sometimes I feel a little bit guilty because, I feel that, Nepal needs them more than us. And then, Nepal has invested so much in their training, education, right? But, Australia is able to attract them to migrate here, which is actually good for Australia, but not really good for Nepal. But, if we invest in our children education, then we don't need to do this.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Yes. And I understand. I mean, we love Nepalese doctors. We're having them here in Australia. They're wonderful doctors, but I do understand, as you say, the guilt because we'd also need them in Nepal. So, yes, that we can educate more Australians, yes, including Australians of Nepalese heritage for those professions. That's a wonderful thing. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. And Chris, actually, will the Labour government, take more refugees from Afghanistan if it comes to power?
Yeah, so we've called for the government to do more for Afghanistan. They've said 3,000. We think we can do better than 3,000. Right. A lot of the refugee places from last year still have been filled because of COVID. So we would take more than 3,000, yes.
Okay, that's really good. The refugees are really good for Australia as well. Like, normally these people, they come from really desperate situation, and when they come here, they really work hard. If you look at some of the rich people in Australia, there are actually 4 billionaires who were once refugees. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally.
So,
Totally, absolutely. Refugees are wonderful, go on to do wonderful things, even if they become millionaires and billionaires, as many have. Frank Lowy, who started Westfield,
yeah,
was a refugee.
yes,
But even
and
if
also
they
Harry
don't,
Triguboff.
and Harry Triguboff, but even if they don't, they become hard workers and
Yeah,
raise good families, and they love the country that gave them refuge. So absolutely, absolutely, no question.
right, sure. That's good. One more thing I want to talk to you about the relationship with China, because as you know, the current government hasn't been so good at, keeping the diplomatic relationship with China. And it seems like China is taking things very personally, and they've been putting a tariff on all these agricultural goods. And probably they may not also encourage their students to come to Australia to study, which is going to have a very, dire effect on our economy, right? And at the same time, like US, we are following US really closely, right? And in some of the agricultural products that China is not buying from Australia, US actually has benefited because they can fill that gap. So it's a relationship where I think Australia should really balance between US and China, so that it's win-win for everyone. What's your perspective on this case? Like, do you think Labour government would deal with China in a more diplomatic manner and rebuild the relationship that's a little bit sour at the moment, and at the same time we don't upset US as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for everyone, the Labor Party supports most of the government's policies on China. So we agree with them on South China Sea, we agree with them on foreign interference, all those things. But we also think that the relationship could have been handled better in terms of communications.
Yeah.
And trying to deal with things, in diplomacy means, quietly, not with a big megaphone all the time. And that this government likes the megaphone. Also, I think, Ryan, that there's an opportunity for countries like Australia to work with other middle powers, what we call middle powers. So not great powers, not tiny countries, but middle powers. And there's an opportunity for Australia to be more active with those middle powers, like, India, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada, to work together to say, okay, how are we going to handle this situation? Because we're all in the same boat, very similar situations. Just Australia by itself doesn't make much of a difference. But if Australia's working with Canada, Germany, United Kingdom, France, India, and similar countries of similar Korea, of those sorts of sizes, maybe we can make a big difference in foreign affairs. So I think we always said is, you have to choose between China and US, and there's some truth to that. But also maybe there's more opportunity for the smaller countries to work together.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. And Chris, I wanted to talk to you also about the negative gearing. Will Labour government continue on the policy of scrapping negative gearing in the future, or will
we won't make any changes to negative gearing. We're going to keep the policy. We had changes for the last election, but we didn't win. We accept that, and we won't make those changes.
Right. Okay. Just a personal question, Chris. I think you've been asked this question in the media as well in the past. The last election was almost sure shot victory for Labour, and then at one point you said that you were sounding a little bit arrogant by saying that if you don't like us, don't vote for us, and that cost Labour the victory. Do you agree?
Look, I shouldn't have said it that way.
Yeah.
It was a bad choice of words. What I was trying to say was it's a democracy, and you people can choose who to vote for. It's not compulsory to vote Labor. That's what I was trying to say. That we have our policies, we're putting them all out there, and people can judge the policies. I used some words which maybe sounded arrogant. I didn't mean them arrogant at all, and I regret saying it. But That's what I was trying to say. In a democracy, both sides should have policies, and the people can judge. We lost the election for a few different reasons. Some people have said that after the election, but there were lots of things going on at the election. But we almost won. We came very close. But yeah, I regret saying it. I should have said it better, and I wouldn't say it again.
Right. Sure. And Chris, I really admire your work. You're very approachable, very humble. I live in Pemulwuy, so I've seen you quite a few times coming here, talking to people, face to face, right? And I think you have the charisma, you have the talent and so much experience. I think you are a prime minister material. Do you see yourself being prime minister of Australia one day?
Don't get me in trouble, Ryan. You're going to get me in trouble. No. I just do the job I have at the time. All good.
Okay. Anyway, I wish you all the best, Chris. Okay, I think we're almost out of time. Maybe I'll just ask you one last question, because you are the Minister for Climate Change and all. What's your policy on climate change at the moment? As you know, Scott Morrison is not so good at it.
That's right. That's right.
He hasn't come up with any policy so far, to be honest.
That's right. And it's a big problem, and countries like Nepal have a lot to lose from climate change, as you know, and countries like Australia should be doing more. We could talk for another half an hour about climate change and our policies, but we have started good policies on climate change. We've announced some. We have many, many more to announce, but there'll be a big difference between the Liberal Party and the Labor Party on climate change at the next election.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we look forward to hearing some really strong policies on climate change from Labor government, because that's the pressing issue globally at the moment, and I think Australia can't afford to be silent on this matter. We should do something. And because we export so much coal, though we are a small country, we are actually having an impact in global warming indirectly, right? So it's our responsibility as well to do something to, slow down global warming.
Totally. We are actually a big emitter. In Australia. We are the 17th biggest emitter in the world, but every country, Australia, Nepal, all of us have to do something. We can't just say it's their problem, their fault. We can't just leave it to China and the United States, because it won't be enough.
Right, sure. Okay, Chris, would you like to say anything to the Nepalese community in Australia? Because, it's a growing community. There's more than 100,000 people of Nepalese origin living in Australia now. And most of them are very hardworking. They are one of the successful migrants in Australia. So they would love to vote for Labor government, would you like to tell them something, personal basis?
Well, thanks, Ryan. I mean, I know many Nepalese Australians. I love the community. I've got very fond memories of different things I've done with the Nepalese community. I remember when I was Minister for Immigration being invited to a conference of Nepalese around the world, all the international Nepalese. The conference was in Sydney. Very big conference, and I was made very, very, very welcome, and I very much enjoyed it. And I've met with the Nepal ambassador and all the various officials of Nepal over many years. One day I'd like to go. I've never been. One day I would like to go, but unfortunately we're not going anywhere at the moment. But when we can travel again, maybe one day I can go to Nepal and see it for myself. But it's an honour to represent some Nepalese Australians, to represent you, and I regard all Nepalese Australians as very good friends.
Yep, definitely you should visit Nepal. It's a beautiful country. I'm sure you'll enjoy it if you like nature, right? And just maybe one last question, Chris, can we expect to see a bit of multicultural faces in the Labor Party in the near future?
Well, yes, Ryan, the thing I love about the Labor Party is we do much better than the other side on diversity, but we always try to do better. So we already have a very diverse caucus. We have Anthony Albanese himself is of Italian heritage. He'd be the first Italian Australian to become Prime Minister.
Right.
In our area, we have Ed Husic, who is the first Muslim in Parliament. And Michelle Rowland is of Fijian heritage. We have Linda Burney, who's the first Indigenous female in Parliament, in Federal House of Representatives. We have some Jewish members of Parliament. So we have quite diverse. And we're going to announce some more candidates over the next little period. I think you'll see a lot of diversity, including representatives from Asia. And of course, our leader in the Senate, Penny Wong, is Malaysian Chinese. So we have a very diverse caucus to start with, but we can always do better. Not one. I know that this is very topical at the moment. There's one pre-selection which people are talking about, but you can't just use one pre-selection as the test to say Labor succeeds or Labor fails. It's about the total, and I think while we can do better, we're doing much, much better than the government, and you will see us also have more diversity going forward.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chris. I really
Good on
enjoyed
you,
talking
Ryan. It's been
to
a
you.
great pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. Thank you very much. Bye.